Welcome to No Romance Without Finance. Our guest today is Unni Turrettini. Unni is an author, speaker, trainer, and human connection expert, helping professionals and teams amplify human connection for engagement, well-being, and productivity. She has authored 2 books and regularly appears in the media, including ABC's The List, NTD News, TRT World, GB News, Ticker News, Fox 26, C-SPAN, the TEDx Stage, the James Altucher Show, BBC, and The World Today. Unni grew up as a global citizen, spending half her life abroad, including the United States, France, and Switzerland, before returning to Oslo in 2016. With law degrees from Norway, France, and the United States, she is a member of the New York Bar and worked in law and finance for nearly a decade before becoming a full-time author, speaker, coach, and trainer. In this episode, Unni talks about how a Norwegian national tragedy drove her to seek human connection and understand how it impacts our society. We talk about what causes us to feel unfulfilled and lonely, even when it looks like we have it all. Unni also tackles 2 controversial questions, answering whether a man and woman can be just friends and whether it's possible to find true happiness without a romantic relationship. Hi, Unni. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Patty. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm very excited to have you because you are someone that we've never had on the show. And when I was looking through your content, I was really excited because most people aren't aware of what you do and how the services that you provide can help them. So I think this is going to be very, very valuable information to the listeners. So, Unni, you are a human connection expert. Tell us, what is a human connection expert and what do you do?
Great. Thank you for asking that question. My story, I come from a legal background. I'm a New York attorney. I worked in a Wall Street law firm. I worked in finance for many years. And so I didn't come from this sort of like this, human, aspect at all. Right. And I was miserable most of the time, right? I didn't feel like I didn't really feel seen or valued or understood. And I was bored most of the time. I was disconnected and wow. But I didn't know that this was sort of a human connection issue, right? I just felt that I, was not motivated. And I, kind of like, there were times where I just did the bare minimum, right? To get by, right. to not be fired.
Right.
And it was really years later when I was, I had taken a pause working and I was home with my 2 small babies. And we have this horrific mass shooting in Norway. I was living in Switzerland at the time, but I remember trying to call home and, couldn't get through. This was our 9/11. And what I discovered when I started like looking really deeper into this, this mass shooter was that he struggled with loneliness. He didn't know that he didn't feel like he had a place in our society, in our group. And, he struggled with this, all these disconnection issues. And that's when I really felt that. I recognized myself in that pain. And that's when I started researching human connection. This is, more than a decade ago. I started researching loneliness, human connection, what makes people thrive, how can we do better? Because I knew that I wasn't the only one who struggled with this at work. Right. So many people around me. And so I developed, throughout the years, I developed a method because I thought, well, I got to help people with this because I know I got myself out of it and I got to help other people. So that's really why I labeled myself a human connection expert. It's not something that you see, right, all over the place, but it's human connection is what we live for as, as a species. It's what makes or breaks a relationship, our success in the world, in the workplace, and also as entrepreneurs. So it is really important.
And when you're talking about, the lack of human connection, do you think that, and you were talking about mass shootings, do you think that this is why we have so many mass shootings now is due to the lack of human connection and loneliness? Is that something that you attribute that to?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I talk about in the media as well. I wrote a book about it, and it's really we're so disconnected as a society. I mean, just look at the division like now with like just the political debates and all the things that are going on in our society. We're so divided. We can't seem to find common ground and to be able to even have a conversation with people that we fundamentally disagree with, even though we might actually agree on the outcome. It's just we don't agree on how to get there. But we used to be able to have conversations and be able to be, have friendships and be colleagues and friends and with people that we don't agree with. Nowadays, it just seems that we are more and more disconnected and, just divided as a people.
Right. And I think one thing people don't understand is that loneliness can happen when you have a lot of people around you too, right? It's not just the person that's alone in their basement. And one thing that I really loved that you did in your content is that you were vulnerable about you being married and having children and feeling lonely. And there are a lot of people out there, women and men, who are in marriages, who are in relationships that have a ton of people around them, right? Their husband or wife, they have a lot of kids, and they are feeling so lonely. And that, I think, is the worst type of loneliness, is to feel lonely when you're not. Because you're looking around going, oh my gosh, I have it all. At least perception wise, right? They see that you have the big house and you have the nice car and you have the great career and the great husband and the great children. And yet you're feeling lonely and unfulfilled. Why does that happen?
Thank you for bringing that up, Patty. This is so important. And this is the reason why I shared about that on social media, because I didn't see people sharing a lot about that, to be frank. And I felt that it was needed because it's something that I would speak to clients about. And I do executive coaching. I coach leaders and executives. I train teams and help them with these human connection issues. And people would talk to me about these things and we would talk about it in private. But everybody said, like, listen, you're the only person I've ever mentioned this to. Like, this is not something we'd like to talk about. And it's the most common feeling of disconnection and loneliness is when we are actually, it seems like we have it all because there's so much shame around it. There's so much, it means, because if you are lonely and you are not stranded on some remote island someplace,
right,
and you actually you live in a city, you have a lot of people around you, you have great colleagues, you're married, you have kids, you have the dog, you have everything, and you still feel empty and you feel bored and you feel like there's something really unfulfilled about your life, that means that in your head that you have failed at social connection. Because you look at everybody around you and they all look so happy and they all look so perfect and like they have it all together. And so we're not talking about it, where the truth is a lot of us are feeling that way and we just don't talk about it.
Right. So why are we feeling that way? And what do you do about it?
So what I discovered was the reason why we feel lonely and disconnected when we have other people around us is because we are disconnected from ourselves. That's where it comes from. And this is really something that starts in, I would say, early childhood. We are programmed and conditioned to go out and be like everyone else. We're not encouraged to be our unique selves and to be a little different. And this, of course, it depends on your culture, where you're from. In some places, like in Norway, this is really strong, right? Like you're not supposed to think in a different way or act or any way. It's really, you're supposed to be like everyone else. And so for me, that was really, really strong, like a strong message for me growing up. But I hear this from my clients and people that I work with also in the United States. So I believe it's, pretty much everywhere, that we, and we are so focused on fitting in and being like the people around us. And then we, start our careers, and we go out there and we apply for jobs, and we want to be liked, and we want to fit in, and we want to, live up to the expectations of us. So we just, fit into these boxes. And before we know it, we've lost ourselves, and we've lost connection with who we truly are. And what is it that actually makes me happy? What do I actually enjoy reading? Or what kind of movie do I like seeing? Like all these things, we kind of lose who we are and what brings us joy. And that's part of that disconnection.
And it's another way of saying it is that you are not living authentically, right? You're not being your authentic self. And I can tell you the most miserable time of my life was when I was living in a situation that everyone thought was the most perfect time of my life, right? So I was engaged to a man who, gave me everything, quote unquote, right? Had, plenty of money. We lived in a great house. I drove the fancy cars. And while I always worked, I always supported myself. He was very, very controlling, and he demanded that I change who I was. And at that point in my life, I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't confident enough. And I had just recently lost my parents when I met him, that he replaced them for me, right? So he was like the person that replaced what I had lost in my parents. So I wasn't strong enough to say no. So slowly he began to change who I was and break down who I was. And I was the unhappiest I've ever been in my life. And I had no idea who I was, and I was disgusted by myself because I would look in the mirror and I didn't know who this person was looking back at me. And I think that is the issue with so many relationships, is that we are afraid to be our authentic selves because we are afraid of how the other person is going to react to us being who we truly are. Am I correct in that statement?
Absolutely, Patty. And this is something, what you're describing is just so common. It's something that I've gone through, multiple times in my life, in previous relationships, and even in my with my husband today, right? We've been married for many, many years. And it's something that I, almost every woman I speak with, is struggling with some form of having lost herself, and is in a way sacrificed herself and trying to fit into being the wife, the mom, the partner, the spouse, everything that is expected. Right. And forgetting about us as we go into these roles, and we just play them. And then, we wake up one day and we have no idea who we are and what to do about it and how to get out of it. We just know that we're miserable.
Right.
So it's very common.
Do you think it's because we've been inculcated as children to be in those roles?
Absolutely. I think that's part of it. And also I think it's part of our genetics too, that as women are, as well, men and women, we're relational beings, right? So we search for relationships. That's how we survived as a species. So that's normal.
Right.
But women are even more relationship focused than men. So we are the people who we will change ourselves a little bit to make that other person happy. We will put them first. We do that. We're nurturing. We're it's in our genes to be caretakers and moms and spouses and all that. So we kind of we put all the other people before us, and we do this at work too. We put everything ahead of us, and we don't see men doing that in the same way, right? So, right. What I experience is that more women than men are dealing with loneliness and disconnection because of this.
Right. And so I want to push back just a little bit, Uni, because I want to talk about this nature versus nurture and whether
Yeah.
it is in fact in our genes. And the reason that I bring this up is because there's a recent study that came out. And actually, I'm going to have one of the anthropologists on my show to talk about this. And there's a recent study that came out regarding the hunter-gatherer role, right?
Yeah.
And the study was that, we used to think that the men were hunters and women were gatherers. And because of that, the men, that theory has been used to put men in positions of superiority, leaders, breadwinners, heads of households, and that's their natural role, and women in their natural roles and genetically predisposed to be the caretakers, the nurturers. Well, this study has turned that on its head because it's shown that in indigenous societies, women hunted just as much as men. Women were out there hunting big game, and in fact, the best hunters in the tribes were the grandmothers. So a lot of this archaeological findings have come to show that it's not really in our nature, that we've been inculcated over thousands of years to think that is in our genes. And what do you say about that?
That's really interesting. That is a study that I actually haven't heard of. So I would be super interested in,
I'll send it to you.
Learning more about that. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting. And it just goes to show then how we have been conditioned, for generations to think that this is how we're supposed to be. Right. So it just goes to show. And I think that, and that's also why when I work with people, that the first thing we start working on the most, I would say that like the most foundational work that we do is the reconnection with ourselves. Because when you reconnect with yourself, you also find your value. You start valuing yourself more. And that's when you stop putting other people's always ahead of you, right? And it doesn't mean that men don't do that, at all, because like my husband does that, of course, because, for him, our kids and me, we are the most important, people in his life. So men do that too. It's just that I think that for women, we have undervalued ourselves.
Yes.
And been undervalued and undermined ourselves, and that's something that we have to stop doing. And we need to find ourselves again and the value that we actually have,
right?
And that we bring to the table, right?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times in relationships, we're afraid to be who we are because we're afraid that the other person won't like us, right? And I want to know, how do we overcome that fear? And the way that I do it, Unni, is that every time, and I still struggle with this, and every time I feel like I don't want to say anything because I'm afraid of how he's going to react, I make it a point of doing it, of saying it, right? Because I'm like, this is the only way I'm ever going to overcome this, because this is who I am, and he's just going to have to hear it. So that's kind of the way that I do it. But what are some strategies that women can implement as to how to overcome this fear of being who we really are?
Yeah, I mean, this is so important, and it's something that I used to struggle with because I, as you said, I wanted to be liked and I wanted to please, and I, all the things. And what I found in my experience and in the experience of all the people that I work with is that when you don't show who you are, when you don't set the boundaries, when you don't tell them about your boundaries and what you're like and what your preferences and all the things, when you don't do that, you end up regretting. There's resentment that builds up.
Yes.
There's this, and then you might explode, and then he doesn't know what happened, right? Because he didn't follow the process. And that's not fair on him either, on the partner, because they don't know, right, what's going on. So it's our obligation to share what we're thinking and what we're feeling. And of course, there's ways of doing that. You can do that. So that's part of the things that I also train in is how do you communicate in a way that is not, it's not angry. It's not, offensive. It's not, there are ways of saying things that, and very simply and very nicely that the other person can hear and understand.
Right.
And then if you do that, and then if they don't, then maybe they're just not the right person, right? So there's that too.
Absolutely. And you better find that out now, right? Instead of pretending to be somebody else and liking some other thing, right, that you don't like, because you're only going to be able to pretend to like what you don't like for a certain period of time before you're going to explode, and you're just not going to be able to do it anymore. I remember when I first started dating my fiance, he loves science fiction movies. I hate science fiction movies. I hate it. So I would watch these science fiction movies, like, okay, once in a while it's okay, but over and over and over again with him. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I can't watch another freaking science fiction movie. What am I doing to myself? And I finally told him, like, you know what? I am happy to watch it with you once in a while, but this isn't my shtick. And the reason I remember the reason I didn't want to tell him is because I wanted him to look at me. Wow, we have so much in common. This is the woman for me. She loves science fiction. Yeah. Like I'm pretending to like something just so he could think that we have so much in common. But I'm like, you know what? If me liking science fiction movies is what our relationship is based on, then it's just not meant to be, right? So I think that we need to expose ourselves and our truth earlier on in the relationship, because we're just not going to be able to play this game and this facade forever. It's eventually going to come out. So let's just bring it to the forefront.
For sure. I mean, that is such a good point. And, I think that we have this sort of idea that we should do, like in this romantic, when we're in love and all the things, and especially in the beginning, that we should do all the things together.
Right.
We're different human beings. We're just we're different. And it's okay that, I like to play golf and he doesn't. It's okay that, he'd rather, play tennis and I go for a walk with the dog. It's okay that we do different things, that we like different movies. Let's find things that we can also do together, for sure.
Sure.
But it's okay that we don't do everything together. And I think it's okay that we accept the other person for who they are. Like we expect to be accepted and respected for who we are, and that we don't try to change the other. Like we can have different, we can still, because, we want our relationships to last for a long time, right?
Sure.
And you can't find everything in one person. So it's okay to have friends, other friends and people you can do different, like that he can go out and, watch the sci-fi movies with, right?
Absolutely.
And then, but you have, so I think that's something that we as women, especially, because I think that's more the women that I speak to that want for everything to do all this stuff together, than the men. They don't necessarily think about those things.
No, they don't. And again, I think it's an inculcation thing, right? Is that we've been inculcated to think, oh, we need to do. Yeah. And I'm such an independent person, and thank goodness, so is my fiance. So like, we have a 3-story home, and it's like we could go days without seeing each other, because his studio is in the 1st floor and my office is in the 3rd floor, and we really need that time apart. So we had a lot of questions, and you're the perfect person to ask this next question from. Is I was always brought up with male friends. Okay, I've had male friends, and my fiance has female friends, and we never really saw the distinction between men and women as far as friendships go. And I've done these videos on TikTok, and I get a lot of pushback around, well, men and women, you should never have lunch or dinner with the opposite sex. That's disrespectful. That opens the door to cheating and all of that stuff. Since you're an expert in human connection, can men and women just be friends?
Well, in my opinion, we can. right?
Okay.
And I think it depends on the, how your relationship, if there's trust in your
Right.
relationship, like my husband and I, we have, we completely trust each other.
Sure.
I'm not someone who will try to go through his phone or email or whatever,
Right.
to check out like what, who is corresponding with. And
Sure.
he doesn't do that with me either. And he has, female friends from childhood, and I have male friends from way back. So,
Right.
and it's totally fine. But we
Right.
have that kind of relationship where we trust each other and we know
Sure.
where the limited, and there's no flirtation
Exactly.
involved either. So there's no
Right.
like stretching the boundaries or anything like that.
Correct.
And it's not that it's like that is very often either that we have dinner or lunch with the a male like
Right.
for me with a male friend or but it happens, and especially when I'm
Right.
traveling and I
Yeah.
I live in Oslo and I travel to New York, and we have some really good friends, and they will invite me for lunch, and
Right.
it happens to be a man, and we're
Right.
having a great lunch, and then we
Yeah.
see each other 2 years later, and I think we need to normalize that, and I think
Yep.
we need to also, and again, it comes back to trust. And if you are connected with yourself, and if you have confidence, and you know your value, you know your worth, and you know the value and the worth of the relationship that you're in, and you can have that sort of trust, then it's a non-issue.
Right. Exactly.
But I think that when you don't trust yourself, then you don't trust the other person either, because you're
Absolutely.
disconnected with yourself. So it comes back to the trust factor.
Right. And you have to trust yourself and be confident enough within yourself, right? And when you have confidence in yourself, then you can have confidence and trust in the other person. It really comes from lack of confidence when, that trust is gone. And that's going to kind of take me to relationships and finance, because, our podcast is No Romance Without Finance. And as far as the human connection goes, do you think that sharing in the finances provides a higher level of human connection, or does it matter? Because for me, I always say that you can have a joint account where you're sharing in the expenses for the home, but I also am a big advocate of each person having a separate account on their own, because I think really financial independence is very important for both people, because it allows you a certain level of independence, And I get a lot of pushback from people saying, well, once you're married, you have to share everything. And if you don't, then you're saying that you're going to get a divorce, and that takes away that connection that you have. Again, since you're a human connection expert, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, not only am I a human connection expert, I'm also a lawyer. So I know, like,
Yes.
when it comes to divorces
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
the statistics and the laws around that as well. And what I see, and just how I live my life with my husband, is that you do not need to share everything and have the joint accounts and all that. If you want to, and if both parties want to, sure, why not?
Right.
But I think it's a false premise. I think it gives sort of a false security to that you think that if we do have everything in common, that's going to save our relationship. That's going to prevent us from getting a divorce. Statistics, does not, support that statement at all.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a false premise, and I think it's all about, as you say, having a feeling that you know what, I'm actually fine on my own. I have my independence, but I choose to love this person. I choose to be together with this person. And then, of course, with the years, and like for instance, in my life, like I quit my corporate job, and I was at home with my, with the kids for a few years, and then I started working again. And for those years, I was supported by my husband, and he's always been very supportive in my endeavors and my, entrepreneurial projects and all of that, even now. And, and he's still very happy to support me financially. Right. Because he sees that as his role. And I've always, probably like 80% of all women, contribute more to the household, to the kids, and and all of that at home. And that is also fine. I think each couple has to figure out what works for them. What's important is that you know that you are equals, and what each is bringing to the table is 100. It's not less because you're bringing in less money, right?
Right.
And because you're doing other things that compensate, whatever. You're equal in your relationship, and you respect each other equally.
Sure.
And for example, we have my husband and I, we have separate accounts, and we do not share, and I don't see us getting a divorce anytime soon. It's just really just how you choose to organize your assets and your financial life. And it's really, the relationship doesn't depend on the dependence, of money and bank accounts.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. Amen.
Right.
Yes. And I have one final question for you, and this question is around whether it's okay to be single for the rest of your life, because we are by nature packed animals, right? So we do require human connection, and that's not lost on me, because we do require that. And I always say that, you don't need a man in order to be happy, because I think a lot of women feel that they do need a man to be happy. And they say, well, it's easy for you to say because, you have a man. Well, I found love at 46. That's pretty late in life, right? And although he brings a lot of love, a lot of joy into my life, I still would be happy had I not found love, because my happiness cannot be dependent on another individual. Okay. So where is that line, Unni? Like, where's that line between we're packed animals, we need to be in relationships, but yet my happiness does not depend on having a man. How do we reconcile the two?
So our need to come together and live with a man, it comes from the reproduction. To reproduce, to have kids, to continue our human species.
Right.
So that's ingrained in us. Now, when it comes to happiness, though, that's a different aspect. You can be miserable in a marriage, your whole life, and I have many friends who are single, who are not looking for a partner at all, and they're very,
smart.
very happy. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on each person, I would say. And because when it comes to human connection, there are 3 levels of connection that we all need. And the first one is the intimate, the very sort of either the spouse, the partner, or a best friend, or or a few friends, right? That you can have that fulfills that. And then there's the larger sort of social, with a larger network of friends and colleagues and people. And then there is the third level, is the societal, feeling that you have a place in our society, that you actually belong here. And we need all 3. So if you're lacking in one area, you can feel disconnected and lonely. But you need all 3. But you don't need to be married or to have a man in order to feel fulfilled in the first area, which is the intimate.
Right.
There's so many ways to fill that emptiness with good friends, with with a purpose, doing something that you love, with a group of friends, or and have those. And I also think it's important for us to remember that it's not because you don't have that one best friend since childhood that you're lacking in that department either. We can make friends at any stages of our lives. And to be honest, my best friends today, I have met in the last few years, and they're not my childhood friends. So I think it's important to know that it's never too late to make really, really special and good friendships. And also, it's never too late to find love. Like you said, you were 47. I know people who, in their, 70s or even 80s have met the love of their life, right? So it's never too late.
Yes, I agree. And listeners, you heard it here first. A human connection expert said that you don't need a man in order to be happy, which is what I've been preaching since day one. Unni, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell the listeners where they can find you.
Thank you so much for having me, Patty. So please connect with me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, or through my website. And my name is Unni Turrettini, and I'm pretty easy to find because I'm the only one in the world with my name. So just Google UNNI and then Turrettini. It's TURRETTINI. And you'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you are, I will be there.
And we will definitely tag you in the podcast. And you've been a wealth of information. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys, please follow her. Her Instagram is great. I really enjoy watching it. And just really great little nuggets of knowledge for all of us. So Unni, thank you again for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe and rate our podcast. That is the only way that we keep this going.
Thank you so much, Patty. It's been a pleasure.